The call came through at 2:47 in the morning, and by the time the sun rose again, 97 motorcycles would be thundering across 300 miles of desert highway, all racing toward one broken promise that refused to stay buried. A girl he'd sworn to protect the day her father died was lying in a hospital bed right now. And the man who put her there wore a badge. Before the sun set on this story, an entire town would be forced to choose a side. Stick with me until the end, because what happens next will remind you what family actually looks like when it shows up. The phone rang 3 times before Cole Preacher Whitfield answered it, his voice still thick with sleep. On the other end was a woman named Patricia Vance from the state's Child Welfare Office. And something in her tone told him before she even finished her sentence that this wasn't a courtesy call. "I'm calling about Maddie Reyes," she said. "She's at Mercy General. Broken ribs. A fractured wrist. Bruising across her back that doesn't match the story we were given." Cole's hand froze halfway to the lamp switch. "What story?" "Her stepfather says she fell down a flight of stairs. The attending physician doesn't believe that for a second, but unless we can establish grounds for emergency removal, she's cleared to go home with him within 24 hours. He was already reaching for his jeans." "How far out am I?" "You're in Prescott. That's over 500 miles. I'll be there by morning." "Don't let them take her anywhere." He hung up before she could argue, standing alone in the dark of his bedroom, breathing like he'd already been running. On the wall across from him hung a photograph he hadn't taken down in 16 years. A young man in desert fatigues, 23 years old, 3 months before an explosion turned him into a memory instead of a person. Danny Reyes, his brother in every way that mattered except blood. The last thing Danny had ever said to him, blood soaking into the sand beneath them both, was a single request that Cole had carried like a stone in his chest ever since. "Watch over my little girl. Promise me." "I promise, brother." 16 years of telling himself that promise was still intact. 16 years of assuming somebody else had picked up the weight he'd set down. He was wrong, and now a 14-year-old girl was paying for his assumption. He called his club first. His president, a mountain of a man named Bear, picked up on the 4th ring sounding ready to fight whoever had woken him. Cole laid it out in under a minute. Danny's daughter, a cop for a stepfather, a hospital bed, a deadline. There was a pause on the line, and then just 3 words. "How many riders?" "Everyone who can throw a leg over a bike. Give me 2 hours. Next came the lawyer, a former club member turned defense attorney who owed Cole more favors than either of them could count. Then came the calls to men and women scattered across 3 counties. Mechanics, a retired firefighter, a nurse who'd seen enough trauma in her career to know exactly what urgency sounded like over the phone. Every single call ended the same way. "I'm in." By dawn, the gas station lot outside town looked like a small army had assembled. Bikes lined up in staggered rows, engines idling, riders checking gear one last time. Cole counted heads as they rolled in, 30, 50, 70, until the final tally landed on 97 riders and 3 support vehicles hauling water, first aid supplies, and enough fuel to get them all the way to Mercy General without stopping. Bear pulled up beside him. "This is everyone who could make it, brother. Every single one." Cole's throat tightened as he looked out over the crowd. Men and women who'd never met Danny Reyes, who owed his daughter nothing, and who had gotten out of bed at 3 in the morning anyway, because a promise between brothers had somehow become a promise the whole club now carried together. He climbed onto a nearby crate so they could all see him. "Most of you never knew Danny. He died saving 6 of us overseas, and before he did, he made me swear I'd look after his little girl. I let that slide. I told myself she was fine. She wasn't. And now she's paying for what I didn't do." He paused, letting that land. "We're not riding in looking for a fight. We're riding in to stand witness. That girl needs to see somebody showed up for her. That's the whole mission." A woman near the front, Dee, a trauma nurse and the only female rider in the club, raised her hand. "And if they try to move us along, we comply, but we don't leave the property." Someone else called out, worry plain in his voice. "What if this makes the news, Cole? 97 bikers rolling up on a hospital. People are going to assume the worst. Let them assume whatever they want." Bear cut in. "We know why we're here." They rode out as the sky was just beginning to lighten. 2 disciplined columns cutting through the empty highway, and every mile felt like it was pulling Cole closer to a debt he intended to finally pay in full. Somewhere around the 4-hour mark, his lawyer called with news an emergency custody petition had been filed and would be heard that morning by a judge known for being fair but unforgiving of nonsense. The stepfather, it turned out, already had lawyers of his own lined up, along with the backing of his union. "This is going to be a fight," the lawyer warned. "Good," Cole said. "We brought an army." They rolled into the hospital parking lot as the afternoon sun hung low and gold over the horizon, engines cutting off in perfect unison until the lot fell into an eerie, disciplined silence. 97 riders dismounted and simply stood beside their bikes, and the rumble that had announced their arrival reached the building long before Cole walked through the sliding doors. Inside, the lobby went dead quiet. Nurses froze mid-step. A security guard reached for his radio. Patricia Vance appeared from a side hallway, took one look at the sea of leather visible through the glass, and pressed a hand to her chest. "I need 5 minutes with her," Cole said. "Just 5. You're not family. Her father died in my arms. 5 minutes. Let her know she isn't alone in this." Patricia glanced past him at the silent crowd waiting outside, then nodded once and led him upstairs. The room was dim, monitors beeping steadily. In the bed, small and fragile in a way that didn't match the fire Cole remembered from Danny's photographs, lay Maddie. Her eyes opened, confused, then widened with recognition. "Uncle Cole?" He crossed the room and knelt beside her, taking her hand carefully. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm sorry it took me this long." Tears slid down her face immediately. He said nobody would believe me. "I believe you. And I brought some people who believe you too." "What people?" He nodded toward the window. From the 3rd floor, the parking lot stretched out below in full view. 97 motorcycles, 97 riders standing in silent formation. Her breath caught. "Who are they?" "Your dad's family. They rode all night to be here for you." She began to sob quietly, and Cole held her hand through it, waiting until she'd steadied enough to speak again. Then, gently, he asked her the question that had been sitting like a weight in his chest since the phone call at 2:47 that morning. "Maddie, I need you to tell me the truth. Did he do this to you?" She nodded. "Has he done it before?" Another nod. "What about your mom? What really happened to her?" Her voice went flat, distant. "He killed her. They were arguing about money. She was trying to leave. He pushed her down the stairs, and then he put her in the car and crashed it so it would look like an accident." The room went silent except for the steady beep of the monitors. Cole felt something cold and focused settle over him, but he kept his voice level for her sake. "You're never going back there. Not ever." The door burst open before she could respond. A man in uniform stood in the frame, flanked by 2 men in expensive suits. Her stepfather, Officer Grant Sorensen, cold-eyed and clean-cut, radiating the kind of controlled fury that made the room feel smaller. "Who the hell let you in here?" Cole rose slowly, positioning himself between the man and the bed. Someone her father trusted. Sorensen's eyes flicked to the window, and his face drained of color at the sight of the parking lot below. "What is this?" "That's family. Something you clearly don't understand." One of the attorneys stepped forward, spouting something about legal standing, but Patricia cut through it, informing Sorensen flatly that an emergency custody hearing had already been filed and would be heard the next morning. Sorensen's hand drifted toward his belt, toward his sidearm, and Cole's voice dropped low and steady. "Don't. You pull that in front of her with 97 witnesses outside, your career is finished before this room clears out." His hand froze. His lawyers dragged him out, hissing threats about seeing them in court, and the doors swung shut behind them, leaving the room in a silence that finally felt safe instead of suffocating. That night, the club refused to leave. They set up rotating shifts on the benches outside the hospital entrance, refusing every attempt by hospital security to clear them out. Staying calm, staying legal, staying exactly where Maddie could see them from her window if she woke up scared in the dark. Around midnight, an anonymous text lit up Cole's phone. "You made a mistake. Back off or this gets ugly." He didn't respond. Instead, he called Danny's parents, a couple he hadn't spoken to in over a year, convinced they blamed him for staying away as long as he had. Their voices cracked with grief and gratitude in equal measure when he told them where he was and why. They promised to be there by morning to testify. The custody hearing the next day stretched into hours of testimony that tore at everyone in that courtroom. Cole took the stand and admitted, under a sharp cross-examination, that he didn't know Maddie's birthday, didn't know her favorite color, hadn't seen her more than a handful of times over the last decade. The opposing lawyer painted him exactly as he'd feared, an absent stranger, riding in on nostalgia, not qualified to raise anyone. Then Maddie took the stand herself, small and trembling, and told the judge everything: the abuse, the isolation, the phone call her mother made the night she died begging to be picked up, the sound of her mother's body hitting the bottom of the stairs. The defense attorney pressed her relentlessly, suggesting grief had rewritten her memory, that trauma made her an unreliable witness. She held her ground anyway, voice shaking but never backing down. It was a mechanic from Cole's own club who ultimately cracked the case wide open. He'd tracked down Maddie's mother's wrecked car sitting untouched in an impound lot for 2 years, and what he found there stopped the entire courtroom cold. A brake line that hadn't torn from wear, but had been deliberately cut, clean and precise, hours before the crash that killed her. The judge listened to all of it in careful, measured silence, then granted Cole emergency temporary custody on the spot, barring Sorensen from any unsupervised contact pending a full investigation into his wife's death. Sorensen didn't take the ruling quietly. He fled the courthouse, and within the hour Cole learned he'd emptied a significant amount of cash from his bank account and was speeding east on the interstate. What followed was a tense, high-speed pursuit down open highway, ending only when state troopers boxed his car in at a hastily arranged roadblock. He was arrested on the spot, and within days, prosecutors added charges far beyond reckless driving: the reopened investigation into his wife's death, the abuse charges from Maddie's testimony, and financial crimes uncovered along the way that painted a picture far darker than anyone in that courtroom had expected. That evening, back at the hospital parking lot, Bear draped a small leather jacket over Maddie's shoulders, custom-stitched with the club's colors and her name sewn beneath it. She looked out at the 97 riders who'd shown up for a girl most of them had never met, And for the first time since this nightmare began, she allowed herself something close to a real smile. Cole helped her onto his bike, handed her a helmet, and told her to hold on tight. As the convoy pulled out of the lot and onto the open highway, engines roaring together in the fading light, she leaned close to his ear and asked if she thought her father could see them right now. "Yeah," Cole said, throat tight. "I think he can." "Do you think he's proud?" "I know he is." She rested her head against his back as the desert rolled by beneath a darkening sky. And for the first time in longer than either of them could remember, the promise made in blood and sand 16 years ago had finally, completely, been kept. If this story moved you, take a second to like this video and subscribe, because there are more stories just like it waiting for you. Moments where the people everyone underestimated turn out to be exactly the ones who show up when it matters most.